March 14, 1943. Liverpool docks. Rain falling in sheets across the Mersey estuary. Lieutenant Commander Harold Grayson stood on the bridge wing of HMS Starling, watching dock workers load equipment crates onto his corvette while other officers gathered in the chart house below, pointing at his new device and laughing. The equipment weighed 247 pounds. Black metal boxes connected by thick cables. A rotating antenna mounted in a weatherproof housing. Type 271 surface search radar. The first centimetric radar system designed for convoy escort vessels. Grayson had spent 8 months at the Admiralty Research Laboratory understanding how it worked. Now he was bringing it to war. The other commanders called it Grayson's toy. Said it was too complex for combat conditions. Too fragile for North Atlantic weather. Too new to trust when lives depended on split-second decisions in darkness. Commander Phillips from HMS Orcus stood beside the equipment crate, tapping the metal with his knuckles. "What happens when this fails at midnight in a force 9 gale?" he asked. "What then?" Grayson did not answer. He had heard these questions for weeks. At the Western Approach's headquarters. In the briefing rooms. At the officers' mess. The skepticism was everywhere. Radar was unproven technology. Asdic had been the standard anti-submarine detection system since 1918. It worked. Officers understood it. Crews trusted it. Why replace something reliable with something experimental? The answer was written in casualty reports. In February 1943, U-boats sank 63 Allied merchant ships in the North Atlantic. 359,328 tons of shipping lost. 2,167 merchant seamen killed. The convoys were being slaughtered. Asdic could detect submarines underwater, but only at close range. Only when the U-boat was already positioned for attack. By the time escorts detected a submarine with Asdic, torpedoes were already in the water. The Type 271 radar changed the equation. It operated at 10 cm wavelength instead of the older 1.5 meter systems. The shorter wavelength provided finer resolution. Could detect a submarine's conning tower on the surface at 5,000 yards in clear conditions. Could track multiple contacts simultaneously. Could give convoy escorts warning before U-boats reached attack positions. But the technology was new. Untested in sustained combat. Only 12 Type 271 sets existed. The Admiralty was installing them on select escort vessels as an experiment. Grayson's corvette was one of them. HMS Starling would escort Convoy ONS-5 from Liverpool to Halifax, Nova Scotia. 43 merchant ships. 7 escort vessels. 4,000 miles of open ocean. The Western Approach's command expected U-boat attacks. They always came. The equipment installation took 6 hours. Royal Navy technicians bolted the radar antenna to a platform above the bridge. Connected the display unit in the chart house. Ran power cables through the ship's electrical system. Tested the transmission and reception. The Type 271 was operational by 1600 hours. Grayson watched the circular display screen in the chart house. Green phosphorescent light. A rotating sweep line. Bright spots indicating radar contacts. The coast of England showed as a solid line along one edge of the screen. Ships in the harbor appeared as individual points of light. Commander Phillips entered the chart house. Looked at the radar display. Shook his head. "Pretty lights," he said. "I'll trust my eyes and Asdic. You trust your toy." He left without waiting for a response. Grayson understood the skepticism. New technology always faced resistance. But he had studied the reports from experimental installations. Type 271 radar had demonstrated its capability in controlled tests. Detection ranges exceeded Asdic by a factor of 10. Response time improved dramatically. The mathematics were sound. The engineering was solid. The question was whether it would work in combat conditions. HMS Starling departed Liverpool at 0800 on March 15. Convoy ONS-5 formed up in the Irish Sea. 43 merchant ships arranged in 9 columns. Each column spaced 600 yards apart. Each ship maintaining 300 yards separation from the vessel ahead. The convoy stretched across 3 miles of ocean. Speed, 7.5 knots. The merchant ships carried war supplies for North America. Steel, machinery, weapons, ammunition. The return journey would bring food, oil, and raw materials back to Britain. 7 escort vessels protected the convoy. HMS Starling, HMS Orcus, and 5 others. The escorts formed a screen around the merchant ships. 2 vessels ahead, 2 on the flanks, 3 behind. Standard defensive formation. The escorts would maintain their positions day and night. Would investigate all contacts. Would attack any U-boat that approached the convoy. The weather was calm when they left port. Overcast sky, light wind, visibility 8 miles. The Irish Sea was relatively safe water. U-boats rarely operated close to British shores. The danger zone began 500 miles west, where the Bay of Biscay met the Atlantic approaches. That was where the wolf packs hunted. Grayson spent the first day familiarizing his crew with the Type 271 radar. He assigned 2 operators to the equipment. Able seaman Robert Marsh and ordinary seaman David Fletcher. Both men were 22 years old. Neither had radar experience. Grayson trained them on the display controls. Showed them how to interpret the contacts. How to estimate range and bearing. How to distinguish between ships, land, and weather returns. How to identify false echoes from sea clutter. The learning curve was steep. The display was difficult to read in rough seas. Wave returns created random bright spots that looked similar to submarine contacts. Metal objects on the ship created reflections that appeared as false targets. The operators needed to learn which contacts were real and which were interference. That knowledge came only through experience. By March 17, the convoy was 400 miles west of Ireland. The weather deteriorated. Wind increased to force 6. Seas built to 15 feet. Rain squalls reduced visibility to 2 miles. The merchant ships struggled to maintain formation. Some fell behind. Others drifted out of position. The escorts worked constantly to keep the convoy together. German intelligence had detected ONS-5. The Kriegsmarine's B-Dienst radio monitoring service intercepted Allied communications. Decoded convoy routing messages. Determined the convoy's composition, speed, and course. U-boat headquarters in Lorient, France, issued orders. Gruppe Star was to intercept. 15 U-boats formed a patrol line across the convoy's projected path. The wolf pack was ready. Grayson knew the U-boats were coming. Western Approaches Command sent warning messages. Intelligence indicated heavy U-boat concentration ahead. The escorts prepared for battle. Depth charges were readied. Gun crews stood watch. Lookouts scanned the horizon with binoculars. Every man aboard HMS Starling understood what was ahead. The first contact came at 2,315 hours on March 18. Able seaman Marsh was monitoring the Type 271 radar when a new contact appeared on the display. Bearing 047 degrees. Range 4,800 yards. Moving left to right across the screen. Speed estimated at 12 knots. Marsh called Grayson to the chart house. Grayson studied the contact. The movement pattern was wrong for a merchant ship. Too fast. Too deliberate. A submarine on the surface, likely charging batteries while positioning for attack. Grayson ordered action stations. HMS Starling altered course toward the contact. Speed increased to 15 knots. The radar showed the target clearly. Distance closing. 4,000 yards. 3,500 yards. 3,000 yards. The submarine was still on the surface. Still unaware it had been detected. The corvette's crew stood ready. Gun crews trained their weapons toward the target bearing. Depth charge teams prepared for immediate action. At 2,500 yards, visual contact was made. A U-boat conning tower visible against the dark horizon. The submarine was running on the surface. Diesel engines driving it forward at maximum speed. The U-boat command did not know they had been detected. Surface radar warning receivers did not work effectively against centimetric wavelength transmissions. The submarine believed it was invisible in the darkness. HMS Starling opened fire at 2,000 yards. The 4-inch deck gun fired illumination rounds. Star shells burst above the U-boat. Brilliant white light flooded the sea. The submarine was caught fully exposed. The conning tower watch crew saw HMS Starling bearing down. Saw the gun muzzle trained on them. The submarine's klaxon sounded. Emergency dive order. The U-boat captain knew he had seconds to submerge. HMS Starling fired high explosive rounds. The second shot hit the U-boat's forward deck. The third struck the conning tower. Explosions tore metal. The submarine began diving but was damaged. Water poured through holes in the pressure hull. The dive was slow. Too slow. HMS Starling passed over the U-boat's position and released a pattern of 10 depth charges set to 50 and 100 feet. The underwater explosions lifted HMS Starling's stern out of the water. The sea erupted in massive columns of white water. The shock waves propagated through the ocean. Inside the U-boat, men were thrown against bulkheads. Equipment broke loose. Lights failed. The submarine rolled violently to starboard. Hull plates buckled under pressure. Seawater sprayed through ruptured seams. The U-boat surfaced 400 yards astern. Severely damaged. Unable to dive. The crew abandoned ship. Men climbed out of hatches and jumped into the North Atlantic. HMS Starling circled back. Picked up 38 German sailors from the water. The U-boat, U-432, sank at 2,347 hours. The first kill of the battle. Commander Phillips witnessed the attack from HMS Orcus, 2 miles away. He saw HMS Starling detect, close, and destroy a U-boat in darkness. Saw what the Type 271 radar could accomplish. The toy had just saved the convoy from a torpedo attack that would have sunk multiple merchant ships. But Gruppe Star had 14 more U-boats. They were converging on ONS-5. The battle was beginning. The second contact came at 0143 hours on March 19. Ordinary Seaman Fletcher was monitoring the radar when 3 new contacts appeared simultaneously. Bearing 310 degrees, range 6,200 yards. Bearing 015 degrees, range 5,800 yards. Bearing 095 degrees, range 7,000 yards. 3 U-boats approaching from different directions. A coordinated attack. The Wolf Pack was using standard tactics. Multiple submarines striking simultaneously from multiple bearings. Overwhelming the escorts with targets they could not all engage. Grayson radioed the other escort vessels. Designated targets for each ship. HMS Starling would engage the contact at 310 degrees. HMS Orcus would take 015 degrees. HMS Loosestrife would investigate 095 degrees. The escorts broke formation and headed toward their assigned contacts. The convoy's defensive screen had gaps now. Some merchant ships were exposed. The U-boat captains knew this. They were counting on it. HMS Starling closed on the 310-degree contact. The Type 271 radar tracked the submarine continuously. Range decreasing steadily. 5,000 yards. 4,000 yards. 3,000 yards. The submarine remained on the surface. The U-boat captain was confident. Darkness protected him. He believed the British escorts were still using 1.5-meter radar, which could not detect submarines reliably at this range. He was wrong. At 2,800 yards, the U-boat detected HMS Starling visually. Too late. The submarine dove immediately. The swirl of disturbed water marked the dive position. HMS Starling passed over the location 90 seconds later. Released a 10-charge pattern. Depth settings at 150 feet. The explosions created massive underwater pressure waves. Inside the submarine, lights shattered. Gauges cracked. Men's eardrums ruptured from the overpressure. The U-boat survived the attack but was damaged. Hydroplanes jammed. Diving planes unresponsive. The submarine surfaced involuntarily 600 yards away. HMS Starling turned hard to starboard. Opened fire with the 4-inch gun. The first round missed. The second hit the conning tower. The third struck the forward deck. The U-boat's deck gun crew tried to return fire but were cut down by machine gun bullets from HMS Starling's bridge. The submarine captain ordered abandon ship. The crew evacuated. HMS Starling ceased fire when men began jumping into the water. Moved in to recover survivors. U-592 sank at 0219 hours. 41 German sailors were rescued. 2 U-boats destroyed in less than 3 hours. The Type 271 radar was proving its worth. The other escorts had less success. HMS Orcus lost contact with her target. The submarine dove before visual range was achieved. HMS Loosestrife detected her U-boat but the submarine escaped by diving deep and running silent. The escorts returned to the convoy at 0300 hours. Resumed screening positions. But the U-boats were still out there. Still hunting. Dawn came at 0535 hours. Gray light spreading across a gray sea. Visibility improved to 6 miles. The convoy was intact. No merchant ships had been lost during the night. This was unusual. Convoy battles typically resulted in 4 to 6 ships sunk on the first night of contact. ONS-5 had survived untouched. The escorts had driven off or destroyed every U-boat that approached. The Type 271 radar had detected threats before they could attack. Grayson stood on the bridge wing. Exhausted. He had been awake for 26 hours. His eyes burned from staring at the radar display. His hands trembled slightly from fatigue and adrenaline. But the convoy was safe. That was what mattered. Below deck, able seaman Marsh and ordinary seaman Fletcher were still monitoring the Type 271. Learning. Adapting. Understanding the equipment better with each contact. Commander Phillips came aboard HMS Starling at 0800 hours. Transferred by small boat between the vessels. He found Grayson in the chart house. Phillips stood silently for several minutes. Watching the radar display. Watching the operators track contacts. Watching the green phosphorescent screen show what eyes could not see in darkness. Finally, Phillips spoke. "I was wrong," he said. "This changes everything." The battle continued through March 19th and 20th, Gruppe Star pressed the attack. U-boats appeared on the radar screen constantly. Some were detected and driven off. Others were attacked and damaged. 3 more submarines were destroyed. HMS Starling accounted for 2 of them. HMS Orcus sank the 3rd. The convoy escorts worked in coordination, using the radar to vector ships toward contacts, to maintain continuous pressure on the Wolf Pack, to deny the U-boats opportunities for successful attacks. The German submarine commanders grew frustrated. Their attacks were failing. They approached the convoy on the surface and were detected before reaching torpedo range. They dove and tried to penetrate the escort screen underwater but were hunted relentlessly. The British escorts seemed to know exactly where the U-boats were. How was this possible? The submarines had surface radar warning receivers. They should have detected British transmissions. But they detected nothing. The answer was wavelength. German radar warning equipment was designed to detect 1.5 meter transmissions. The Type 271 operated at 10 centimeters. The German receivers were blind to it. The U-boats were being tracked without knowing it. The technological advantage belonged to the escorts. By March 21st, Gruppe Star had lost 6 submarines from the original 15. 4 destroyed, 2 damaged and forced to return to base. 9 U-boats remained. U-boat headquarters ordered them to break off the attack. The losses were unsustainable. Convoy ONS-5 was not worth losing an entire Wolf Pack. The surviving submarines withdrew. The battle was over. Convoy ONS-5 reached Halifax on March 26. All 43 merchant ships arrived safely. 0 losses. This was unprecedented. North Atlantic convoys typically lost 10 to 15% of their ships. ONS-5 lost nothing. The escorts had achieved a defensive victory that changed the balance of the Battle of the Atlantic. Grayson's after-action report was read at Western Approaches headquarters. Admiral Max Horton, Commander-in-Chief Western Approaches, understood the implications immediately. The Type 271 radar had demonstrated decisive capability. Detection ranges exceeding visual range by factors of 3 to 5. All-weather operation. Continuous tracking. The technology worked. Production of Type 271 radar increased dramatically. Every convoy escort vessel was to be equipped. Training programs were established. Radar operators became a specialized rating in the Royal Navy. The equipment that commanders had mocked as a toy became standard equipment throughout the fleet. By June 1943, over 100 Type 271 sets were operational. By December, over 300. The impact on U-boat operations was profound. Submarine commanders could no longer approach convoys safely on the surface. They were detected and engaged before reaching attack positions. Surface running at night, previously the wolf pack's greatest advantage, became suicidal. U-boats were forced to operate submerged for longer periods. This reduced their speed, limited their patrol range, decreased their effectiveness. Allied merchant ship losses in the North Atlantic dropped dramatically. In May 1943, 41 ships were sunk. In June, 17 ships. In July, 37 ships. The numbers continued falling through the remainder of the year. The U-boats were losing the battle. Technology had shifted the advantage to the escorts. Lieutenant Commander Harold Grayson continued serving in convoy escort operations through 1943 and 1944. HMS Starling participated in 18 convoy battles. Destroyed 7 confirmed U-boats. Damaged 4 others. Grayson trained dozens of radar operators. Wrote technical manuals. Consulted with the Admiralty on radar doctrine and tactics. He was promoted to commander in January 1944. Received the Distinguished Service Order for his contributions to anti-submarine warfare. The Type 271 radar evolved. Engineers improved the display quality, increased transmitter power, enhanced signal processing. By 1944, the Type 271M variant could detect submarine periscopes at 2,000 yards. Snorkel masts at 3,000 yards. The technology continued advancing. Radar became the primary detection system for convoy escorts. Asdic remained important but was relegated to secondary status. The survivors from the sunken U-boats were held in prisoner of war camps in Britain and Canada. Many were later interviewed by Allied intelligence officers. Their testimonies revealed the psychological impact of the Type 271 radar. U-boat crews knew they were being detected but did not understand how. The uncertainty created fear. Submariners began calling certain areas of the North Atlantic death zones, where British escorts seemed to have supernatural awareness of submarine positions. German naval intelligence eventually identified centimetric radar as the cause. Kriegsmarine engineers developed countermeasures. New radar warning receivers operating at shorter wavelengths. Radar-absorbent coatings for submarine conning towers. Schnorkel devices that allowed submarines to charge batteries while submerged. These countermeasures reduced the effectiveness of Allied radar but never eliminated it. The technological race continued throughout the war. Commander Phillips survived the war. Retired from the Royal Navy in 1946. Before leaving service, he wrote a letter to the Admiralty. In it, he acknowledged his initial skepticism about radar technology. Acknowledged that his resistance to innovation had been based on unfamiliarity rather than reasoned analysis. He recommended that the Navy maintain institutional openness to new technology even when that technology challenged established doctrine. The letter was filed in the Admiralty archives and forgotten. Able seaman Robert Marsh and ordinary seaman David Fletcher, the 2 radar operators Grayson trained, both survived the war. Marsh became a radar instructor at HMS Collingwood, the Royal Navy's electrical and weapons engineering school. He trained over 400 radar operators between 1943 and 1945. Fletcher transferred to Coastal Command in 1944. Operated air search radar aboard Liberator bombers hunting U-boats in the Bay of Biscay. He participated in 67 operational patrols. His aircraft sank 2 submarines and damaged 3 others. The Type 271 radar remained in Royal Navy service until 1955. By then, more advanced systems had been developed. But the Type 271 established the fundamental principles of naval surface search radar. Centimetric wavelength transmission. Plan position indicator display. Continuous 360-degree scanning. These principles formed the foundation of all subsequent radar development. The equipment that was mocked as a toy in March 1943 became one of the decisive technologies of World War II. It transformed naval warfare. Made surface ships dominant over submarines. Enabled convoys to cross the Atlantic with acceptable losses. Ensured that Britain remained supplied with food, fuel, and war materials throughout the conflict. The Battle of the Atlantic was won by many factors, but radar technology was among the most important. Grayson understood this. In his later writings, he reflected on the resistance he faced when introducing the Type 271 to the fleet. He observed that humans naturally resist change. Naturally distrust new technology. Naturally prefer familiar methods even when those methods are inadequate. Innovation always faces skepticism. The burden falls on the innovator to demonstrate value through results, not arguments. The demonstration came in darkness on the North Atlantic. When a submarine appeared on a radar screen at ranges where eyes could see nothing. When escort vessels could track contacts continuously regardless of weather. When convoys could be protected by technology instead of luck. The results spoke clearly. The skepticism dissolved. The innovation was accepted. By 1945, every major navy in the world had adopted centimetric radar for surface search. The technology proliferated. American, British, Canadian, and Soviet vessels all carried variants of the system. The principles established by the Type 271 became universal doctrine. Surface search radar became as fundamental to naval operations as the compass and the sextant. The German U-boat force never recovered from the technological shift. In 1942, U-boats were the apex predator of the Atlantic. By late 1943, they were the prey. The hunters became the hunted. Not through any moral or ideological change. Through technology. Through innovation. Through the application of scientific principles to warfare. Historians later analyzed the Battle of the Atlantic. Identified multiple turning points. The breaking of the Enigma Code. The deployment of long-range patrol aircraft. The construction of escort carriers. The improvement of depth charge designs. But they consistently identified centimetric radar as one of the three most significant factors in Allied victory. The Type 271 changed the war. Harold Grayson died in 1987 at age 71. His obituary in the Times of London mentioned his distinguished naval career. Mentioned his contributions to anti-submarine warfare. Did not mention the mockery he faced in March 1943. Did not mention that his colleagues called his equipment a toy. These details were forgotten. What remained was the result. Convoys protected. Ships saved. Lives preserved. The equipment itself survived. One Type 271 radar system is preserved at the Imperial War Museum in London. The black metal boxes. The rotating antenna. The circular display screen. Museum visitors can see it. Can read the placard explaining its historical significance. Most walk past without stopping. It looks unimpressive. Old technology. Simple components by modern standards. But in March 1943, it was revolutionary. It detected submarines in darkness. Tracked them continuously. Gave escorts the information needed to intercept and destroy threats before they reached the convoy. It saved ships. Saved lives. Won battles. Won wars. The mockery stopped after March 21. After Convoy ONS-5 reached Halifax with 0 losses. After commanders saw what the technology could accomplish. After the results proved the value. The skepticism transformed into enthusiasm. The resistance became acceptance. The toy became essential. This pattern repeats throughout history. Innovation faces resistance. New technology is mocked by those who trust established methods. The innovators must persist through skepticism. Must demonstrate value through results. Must prove that the new way is better than the old way. Sometimes the proof comes quickly. Sometimes it takes years. For the Type 271 radar, it took 9 days. 9 days of convoy battle. 9 days of detecting U-boats in darkness. 9 days of protecting merchant ships. 9 days of changing the nature of naval warfare. The Battle of the Atlantic continued for 2 more years. But after March 1943, the outcome was no longer in doubt. The escorts had radar. The submarines did not. The technological advantage was decisive. This is what remains. Not the mockery. Not the skepticism. Not the resistance to change. What remains is the equipment that worked. The innovation that succeeded. The technology that saved lives. The radar that protected convoys. The toy that won the war. March 1943. North Atlantic. 43 merchant ships reaching port safely. 0 losses. An unprecedented victory. Made possible by technology. Made possible by persistence. Made possible by someone who believed in innovation even when others mocked him. They called it a toy. Until it saved the convoy. Then they called it essential. Then they called it revolutionary. Then they called it the weapon that won the battle. Names change. Perspectives shift. But the fundamental truth remains unchanged. Innovation works. Technology matters. Results speak louder than skepticism. The radar proved its worth. The convoy survived. The lesson endures.